The time is 06:00 hours on Tuesday, March 21, 1944. The place is the Anzio beachhead, a precarious Allied foothold on the Italian coast, just 35 miles south of Rome. For nearly 2 months, since the initial landings in January, the American and British forces have been hemmed in by a formidable ring of German divisions under the overall command of Field Marshal Albert Kesselring. The front lines are static, a muddy, shell-cratered landscape reminiscent of the trench warfare of the First World War. The Allies are desperately trying to build up strength for a breakout. The Germans, with the high ground, are equally determined to contain and then crush the beachhead. In this tense stalemate, every piece of intelligence, every perceived movement, is scrutinized for clues about the enemy's next move. And in this high-stakes environment, a unique and audacious psychological operation is about to be deployed by the Allies, one that hinges not on brute force, but on the carefully crafted persona of a single fictitious American officer. This is the story of Operation Rupert, a deception plan so subtle and so successful that it would convince the German High Command to reposition some of its most critical armored reserves, based on the perceived intentions of a man who never existed. This is the story of how the ghost soldier, a phantom created by signals intelligence and false documents, fooled the Panzers and helped shape the Battle of Anzio. To understand the necessity of the ghost soldier, we must first grasp the dire strategic predicament of the Anzio beachhead in early 1944. The Allied landings, codenamed Operation Shingle, had been launched on January 22nd with the ambitious goal of outflanking the formidable German Gustav Line, the main defensive position running across Italy south of Rome. The landing itself was a tactical surprise and initially unopposed. However, the Allied commander, U.S. Major General John P. Lucas, chose to consolidate his beachhead rather than strike inland rapidly for the Alban Hills, a move that could have cut the vital German supply lines to the Gustav Line. This hesitation proved fatal to the operation's strategic aim. Kesselring, a master of defensive warfare, reacted with astonishing speed, rushing reinforcements to seal off the beachhead. Within a week, the Allies were contained. What followed was a brutal, static battle. The beachhead, roughly 15 miles wide and 7 miles deep, was under constant German artillery fire from the surrounding heights. Casualties mounted from shelling, sniper fire, and miserable trench conditions. The Allied High Command, including Winston Churchill, who had championed the operation, was bitterly disappointed, famously stating he had hoped to hurl a wildcat onto the shore, but instead got a stranded whale. It was within the intelligence apparatus of this stranded whale that the concept for strategic deception was born. The key figure was Captain later Colonel William Harris, the chief of the Psychological Warfare Branch, PWB, attached to the U.S. Fifth Army at Anzio. Harris, a former advertising executive from New York, understood that in the claustrophobic intelligence environment of the beachhead, the German command would be hyper-attentive to any clues about Allied intentions. They would be sifting through prisoner interrogations, analyzing radio traffic, and studying any captured documents or personal effects for insights. Harris proposed a bold idea: to create a completely fictional U.S. Army officer, endow him with a believable personality and a specific, worrying military role, and then ensure the Germans captured meticulously crafted documents that revealed this officer's secret, but false, mission. The goal was to paint a convincing picture of a looming Allied threat that would force the Germans to react, thereby weakening their forces elsewhere. This operation needed a name. It was designated Rupert, after a cartoon character. But the heart of the operation was the fictional officer himself. He was given a name, a rank, a serial number, a personal history, and a critical, though entirely fabricated, job. He was to become the Phantom Major. The creation of the ghost soldier was an exercise in meticulous, persuasive detail. He could not be a vague entity. He had to be a fully realized person in the minds of the German intelligence analysts who would study him. The PWB team, under Harris, began constructing their fictional officer. They named him Major William P. O'Brien *** of the 1st Battalion, 157th Infantry Regiment, 45th Infantry Division. He was given a serial number, 0357 for 00. The 45th Thunderbird Division was a real veteran unit fighting at Anzio, lending immediate credibility, but Major O'Brien was no ordinary battalion commander. His fabricated role was the key to the entire deception. Major O'Brien was designated as the Beachhead Mountain Warfare Training Officer ***. This was a brilliant invention. The terrain surrounding Anzio, particularly to the northeast, rose into the Colli Laziali Alban Hills, a rugged, mountainous area. The fiction was that the Allies, frustrated by the stalemate on the flat plain, were secretly preparing to launch a major offensive into these mountains. Major O'Brien's supposed task was to train selected infantry units in specialized mountain warfare techniques, rock climbing, high-altitude supply, assault tactics on steep slopes. His existence would imply that the U.S. Fifth Army was planning to shift its main axis of attack from the flatlands of the beachhead towards the high ground, a move that, if successful, would finally achieve the original goal of cutting the German escape routes from the Gustav Line. To sell this fiction, the PWB created a suite of personal documents for the Major. They were works of art in deception. They included 1. Personal letters, handwritten notes from O'Brien to a friend back in the States, complaining about the difficulty of training flatland boys for mountain fighting, mentioning specific equipment shortages, and casually referencing the strain of preparing for the big push in the hills. The stationery was authentic, the handwriting consistent, the tone believably informal and grumbling. 2. Official orders, carbon copies of typed orders assigning O'Brien to his training role, detailing his responsibilities, and mentioning cooperation with other, real units. 3. Training memoranda, draft outlines for mountain warfare lectures, lists of required climbing gear, and schedules for training exercises. 4. Personal effects, a photograph of a generic officer, actually a PWB staffer in uniform, a receipt from an army post exchange, and other mundane items that added layers of verisimilitude. Every detail was scrutinized. The language used military jargon correctly, but not perfectly. The documents were aged appropriately, crumpled, stained with what looked like coffee or mud, folded and refolded as if carried in a map case for weeks. They were designed to tell a coherent, worrying story to a German intelligence officer. A specialized, high-priority training program was underway, indicating a specific and dangerous Allied offensive intention. The ghost was given flesh, blood, and a mission. Now he needed to be delivered to the enemy. Creating the documents was only half the battle. The method of delivery was equally critical. They could not simply be handed to the Germans. They had to be captured in a manner that seemed entirely natural and unforced, avoiding any suspicion of a plant. The Anzio beachhead, with its static, close-quarters front lines, offered a unique opportunity. Patrols into the tangled, cratered no-man's land were nightly occurrences. Skirmishes were common. Men were captured. Equipment was lost. The PWB devised a simple yet elegant delivery method. They would stage a small, violent patrol clash. A selected U.S. infantry patrol would be briefed on a limited, secret objective: to engage a German patrol, simulate a fierce firefight, and then retreat in haste, leaving behind a haversack belonging to a wounded or killed officer. Inside that haversack would be Major O'Brien's complete personal portfolio. The execution had to be flawless. The firefight needed to sound real to German listening posts. The retreat had to appear panicked and genuine, and the drop of the haversack had to look like an accident of combat. On the night of March 22nd, 1944, the operation was set in motion. A patrol from the 157th Infantry Regiment, O'Brien's purported unit, moved out into the murky, shell-torn landscape. They made contact with a German patrol near the village of Caracito in the eastern sector of the beachhead. A sharp, noisy exchange of small arms fire and grenades erupted. According to the script, the American patrol leader, wounded by the blast of a German stick grenade, gave the order to pull back. In the confusion of the simulated retreat, a haversack was deliberately, but seemingly accidentally, dropped in a muddy shell hole. The patrol returned to Allied lines, mission accomplished. The haversack, its contents carefully curated to tell O'Brien's story, now lay in no man's land, waiting to be found. The next step relied on predictable human and military behavior. It was almost certain that after such a firefight, a German patrol would sweep the area at first light to police the battlefield, look for intelligence, and recover their own dead or wounded. On the morning of March 23rd, that is precisely what happened. A German Feldgendarmerie military police unit, combing the site of the previous night's skirmish, discovered the abandoned American haversack. Recognizing its potential intelligence value, they immediately passed it up the chain of command. The bait had been taken. The ghost soldier's dossier was now in the hands of the enemy. The meticulously crafted life of Major William P. O'Brien was about to undergo its most critical test. Analysis by the intelligence staff of the German 14th Army, commanded by General Eberhard von Mackensen, the officer responsible for containing Anzio. The captured documents from the haversack did not go to a low-level clerk. They were quickly recognized as a significant intelligence find and routed to the Ike intelligence officer of the German 14th Army. The analysts pored over them. The story they told was compelling and alarming. Here was clear evidence from the personal papers of a specialized training officer that the Americans were conducting organized mountain warfare instruction. The references to the Big Push, the specific equipment lists for climbing, the official orders, it all formed a coherent and logical narrative. Given the terrain, the only logical conclusion was that the Allies were planning a breakout attempt northeast from Anzio, driving up into the Alban Hills. This was, from the German perspective, the most dangerous possible Allied move. A successful thrust into the hills could outflank their entire defensive position and open the road to Rome. General von Mackensen and his staff were convinced. They had to take the threat seriously. But where was this mountain-trained force to attack? The PWB, in a masterstroke of implicit suggestion, had clues point to a specific sector. Some of O'Brien's fictional training memoranda made vague references to the Sistina sector and training with units known to be operating there. Sistina di Latina was a key town on the eastern edge of the beachhead, sitting at the base of the mountains. The implication was clear. The breakout would come near Sistina, driving northeast from there into the hills. Von Mackensen reacted as the deceivers hoped. He decided to strengthen his defenses in the threatened sector. But he didn't just add a few extra machine gun nests. In a decision that demonstrated just how seriously the German command took the O'Brien intelligence, von Mackensen ordered the redeployment of a critical mobile reserve, Panzer Units ***. Specifically, elements of the elite ***Panzer Division, Hermann Göring, ***, were shifted from their central reserve positions to reinforce the Sistina area. These were not insignificant forces. They were tanks, assault guns, and mechanized infantry, the very tools needed for a rapid counterattack against an Allied breakthrough. By moving them to guard against a phantom threat in the hills, von Mackensen unwittingly weakened the German center and other sectors of the beachhead perimeter. The ghost soldier had just caused the movement of real, heavy armor. This redeployment had immediate and tangible effects. It meant that when the actual Allied breakout attempt finally came, it would not have to face the full, concentrated weight of the German Panzer reserves in its path. The real Allied plan, Operation Diadem, was being formulated for May 1944. It would involve a massive offensive on the Gustav Line at Monte Cassino, coordinated with a breakout from Anzio. The Anzio breakout was planned not for the mountainous east, but for the western and central sectors of the beachhead. The deception of Major O'Brien had helped create a more favorable correlation of forces for that future, real operation. The Germans were looking the wrong way, their gaze fixed on the hills, their panzers repositioned to meet an attack that would never come from the fictional mountain troops of a man who never lived. The immediate tactical impact of Operation Rupert is difficult to quantify with absolute precision in the chaotic ledger of the Italian campaign. The Anzio beachhead remained a brutal stalemate until late May 1944. However, the strategic and psychological impact of the deception is well documented and significant. The ultra-intercepts of German Enigma code messages, which the Allies were secretly reading, provided the ultimate confirmation of the deception's success. Decrypted German signals in late March and April 1944 revealed specific concerns about American mountain troops and showed the repositioning of units, including Panzers, to counter the perceived threat in the Sistina sector. The Allies were reading the German mind, and they saw their own ghost reflected in it. The ultimate validation came during the final Allied breakout from Anzio, codenamed Operation Buffalo, launched on May 23, 1944. The main thrust was indeed in the central sector, toward the towns of Velletri and Valmontone, aiming to cut Highway 6 and trap the German 10th Army retreating from Cassino. The fighting was ferocious, but the German Panzer reserves were not optimally positioned to counter this thrust because a portion of their strength had been diverted weeks earlier to guard against the Phantom Mountain offensive. The German defensive scheme had been subtly unbalanced by a fiction. The story of Major William P. O'Brien stands as a classic and elegant example of tactical psychological warfare in WW2. It required no radio spoofing, no inflatable tank armies, though those were used elsewhere, no grand theatrical displays. It relied instead on a deep understanding of the enemy's mindset, their fears, and their intelligence-gathering methods. It exploited the natural human tendency to believe a detailed, internally consistent story, especially one discovered through what appears to be battlefield luck. The PWB created a character so believable that he occupied the thoughts of German generals and influenced the deployment of their most powerful weapons. In the vast, machine-dominated narrative of WW2, this story is a reminder of the enduring power of human cunning. It underscores that warfare is not merely a contest of industrial output and firepower, but also a battle of wits and perceptions. The ghost soldier of Anzio, a mere collection of inked paper and clever lies, achieved what thousands of shells could not. He moved panzer divisions. He serves as a testament to the hidden, often undocumented layers of intelligence and deception that shaped the course of the war, proving that sometimes the most effective soldier is one who never fires a shot because he never existed at all. The success of Operation Rupert was not a fluke. It was a carefully engineered exploit of specific vulnerabilities within the German military intelligence system and command psychology during the Italian campaign of 1944. To understand why the Panzers moved for a phantom, we must dissect the environment of belief the Allies so skillfully manipulated. Firstly, the ** context of extreme pressure and uncertainty * on the German command at Anzio was paramount. Field Marshal Kesselring and General von Mackensen knew the beachhead was a dagger pointed at the underbelly of the Gustav Line. Their overriding fear was a coordinated breakout that would link up with an Allied offensive against Cassino, trapping the German 10th Army. Every piece of intelligence was scrutinized under this lens of existential threat. The German command was predisposed to believe in new, threatening developments. It was their job to anticipate the worst-case scenario. The O'Brien documents didn't introduce a radically new threat. They corroborated and specified the Germans' deepest fear, a thrust into the Alban Hills. The documents provided a specific, data-rich answer to the constant, agonizing question, where will they strike? In the absence of definitive signals intelligence or aerial reconnaissance that could peer into Allied planning tents, a captured officer's haversack offered a tantalizing, concrete clue. Secondly, the * meticulous craftsmanship of the documents * played on German methodological strengths and biases. German military intelligence, the Abwehr and the Eich services of field armies were notoriously thorough and bureaucratic. They valued written documentation, orders of battle, and technical details. The PWB fed this tendency perfectly. The mix of personal letters and official memoranda created a powerful verisimilitude. The personal letters provided color and believable human frustration, while the official documents provided the structured military details the analysts craved. The stains, folds, and wear on the papers authenticated them as battlefield debris, not pristine forgeries created in a rear area print shop. Furthermore, the German military held a certain respect, born of experience, for American logistical and training capabilities. The idea that the U.S. Army would appoint a special mountain warfare training officer and systematically prepare for such an operation was entirely plausible. It fit the German perception of American wealth and systematic, if sometimes clumsy, thoroughness. Thirdly, the ** method of delivery was flawless in its authenticity *. A deception plant is most vulnerable at the moment of discovery. If the enemy suspects they are being fed false information, the entire operation collapses and can backfire. The PWB's decision to use a simulated patrol clash in active no man's land was inspired. It placed the documents in a perfectly logical context. Officers carrying important papers did go on patrols. Haversacks were lost in skirmishes. The localized, small-scale violence of the event made it unremarkable at the army level, but perfectly sized for a battalion or regiment intelligence cell to discover and report. There were no grand, suspicious coincidences. The discovery felt like routine battlefield luck, the kind of small break upon which intelligence fortunes sometimes turn. This noise-level delivery was far more credible than, for instance, having a defector walk across the lines with the documents in hand, a method fraught with risk of exposure and interrogation. Finally, the deception exploited a specific, known German concern about terrain asterisk. German tactical doctrine emphasized the importance of controlling high ground Höhenlinie. The commanders at Anzio, looking down from the Alban Hills onto the crowded, flat beachhead, were acutely aware that they held the positional advantage. The very idea that the Allies would try to come asterisk up and fight them on that ground was both alarming and, in a perverse way, respected as a bold, direct challenge. It was a move they themselves might consider in the reverse situation. Therefore, the intelligence did not suggest an illogical or fanciful operation. It suggested the most difficult, but also the most decisive, military option available to the Allies. By confirming the enemy's own tactical assessments of the terrain's importance, the ghost soldier's story became irresistibly believable. In essence, the Allies did not force a foreign idea onto the German command. They identified the idea already growing in the enemy's mind, the fear of a mountain offensive, and then carefully, convincingly provided the proof that it was real. They made the Germans convince themselves. The movement of the Panzers was not an act of gullibility, but a logical military precaution taken by a command structure acting on what it believed to be high-value, battlefield-confirmed intelligence. Operation Rupert, while a brilliantly self-contained tale, was not an isolated incident. It existed within a vast, hidden ecosystem of Allied strategic and tactical deception that spanned every theater of WW2. The ghost soldier of Anzio was a single, elegant thread in a much larger tapestry of illusion woven to confound the Axis. Understanding this context elevates the story from a clever anecdote to a case study in a sophisticated Allied art form. The most famous overarching framework was *** Operation Bodyguard ***, the immense strategic deception plan for the Normandy invasion, D-Day, in 1944. Bodyguard's objective was to mislead the German High Command about the timing and, most crucially, the location of the coming cross-channel invasion. It involved a dizzying array of sub-plans: fake radio traffic from a non-existent army group under the flamboyant General George Patton Fortitude South, the use of double agents like the famed Juan Pujol Garcia, codename Garbo, to feed a consistent stream of false information to Berlin, and the deployment of physical decoys like inflatable tanks and wooden aircraft to simulate troop concentrations in Kent, pointing toward the Pas-de-Calais as the real invasion target. The scale was orders of magnitude larger than Rupert, but the psychological principles were identical: identify the enemy's fears and assumptions, and then craft a believable narrative to manipulate them. In the Mediterranean theater, concurrent with Rupert, operations like ** Operation Zeppelin * sought to pin down German forces in the Balkans by suggesting an imminent Allied invasion of Greece or the Adriatic coast. This involved similar tools: deceptive radio traffic, controlled leaks via diplomatic channels, and visual deception. The goal was to prevent the transfer of German divisions from the quieter Balkans to the raging fronts in Italy or, later, France. These strategic deceptions created a noise floor of threats across Europe, making it impossible for German intelligence to discern the real signals from the false. Rupert operated within this climate of uncertainty, making a localized, tactical deception more potent because the German command was already conditioned to look for and believe in hidden Allied intentions. On a purely tactical level, units like the *US 23rd Headquarters Special Troops ** known as the Ghost Army, were conducting visual and sonic deceptions on the European front. This unique unit, comprising artists, designers, and sound engineers, used rubber inflatable tanks, trucks, and artillery, combined with expertly crafted sound effects of armored columns and troop movements broadcast from powerful speakers, to simulate the presence of large formations where none existed. Their mission was to draw enemy attention and fire, or to mask the movement of real units. While the Ghost Army worked on a physical, sensory level, and Rupert worked on a documentary, intelligence level, both shared the same core mission: to create phantom forces that consumed enemy resources and attention. Operation Rupert thus represents the special operations wing of this deception family, a small, psychologically nuanced, high-precision tool compared to the strategic sledgehammer of Bodyguard or the theatrical roadshow of the Ghost Army. Its brilliance lay in its minimalist, human-scale approach. It required no special equipment beyond paper, ink, and nerve. It exploited the most basic intelligence channel, the captured document. And it proved that in the shadow war of wits, a single, well-crafted ghost could be as disruptive as a phantom army. The success of Rupert and its larger cousins underscores a critical, often overlooked facet of Allied victory in WW2: their mastery of the information dimension, their superior ability to shape the enemy's perception of reality long before the first shell of the real attack was fired. Behind the Ghost Soldier stood a team of very real and inventive individuals. While Captain William Harris was the operational mastermind, the success of Rupert relied on a confluence of personalities and institutional support within the Allied command structure in Italy. Captain William R. Bill Harris *** is the central figure. A pre-war advertising executive from the firm J. Walter Thompson, Harris brought a marketer's understanding of human psychology and narrative to psychological warfare. He didn't see his role as just dropping leaflets. He saw it as selling ideas and perceptions to the enemy command. His insight was to treat the German intelligence officers as a target audience, understanding their needs to predict Allied moves, their fears, a breakout into the hills, and what they would find credible, detailed, bureaucratic documents with personal flavor. His advertising background taught him that effective communication was about telling a compelling story, and Major O'Brien was his most successful creative pitch. Harris worked under the broader direction of the ** Psychological Warfare Branch, PWB, * of Allied Forces Headquarters, AFHQ. The PWB was a joint Anglo-American operation, a melting pot of journalists, academics, artists, and soldiers. It was headed by Brigadier General Robert A. McClure. This organization provided the institutional umbrella and resources for operations like Rupert. They understood that strategic communication and deception were weapons of war. The very existence of such a branch, empowered to plan and execute such operations, signified a modern, holistic approach to warfare that the Axis powers, particularly the Nazis with their reliance on blunt propaganda and terror, never fully matched. Crucially, the operation required the willing cooperation of the frontline combat troops ***. The patrol from the 157th Infantry Regiment that staged the fake firefight and dropped the haversack had to be briefed and trusted to execute their part flawlessly. Their commander had to agree to risk his men in a mission where the objective was not to kill the enemy or take ground, but to lose a piece of luggage convincingly. This speaks to a level of trust and understanding between the cloak and dagger elements and the frontline infantry, a coordination that was not always present in other armies. The soldiers played their parts as actors in Harris's script, their performance lending the final, vital layer of authenticity to the ruse. On the intelligence side, while not directly involved in crafting the documents, the *Ultra intelligence apparatus * at Bletchley Park played a silent, validating role. By breaking the German Enigma and Lawrence ciphers, Ultra provided the Allies with the extraordinary ability to read their enemy's mail. It was almost certainly Ultra intercepts that confirmed the German 14th Army's concern with mountain troops and the subsequent movement of Panzer units. This created a closed feedback loop. The deceivers could launch their operation, and through Ultra, almost instantly see if the bait had been taken. This was an unparalleled advantage, turning deception from a speculative art into something closer to a measurable science. Harris and his team may not have seen the raw ultra-decrypts. They were distributed under strictest secrecy, but the higher command knew the value of psychological operations in synergy with signals intelligence. Finally, one must consider the *** receptive audience on the German side ***. Generals Kesselring and von Mackensen and their Eich officers. They were not fools. They were experienced, professional soldiers. Their very competence made them vulnerable. A less capable command might have ignored the haversack or failed to connect its contents to the larger strategic picture. The German team's diligence in analyzing the find, their doctrinal respect for terrain and allied capabilities, and their operational need to parry every potential threat made them the perfect marks for Harris's scheme. The architects of the illusion built it specifically for the mindset of these particular German commanders, proving that the most effective deceptions are tailored to the intellect of the target. Examining history often involves considering the paths not taken. What if the German patrol had not found the haversack? What if a skeptical intelligence officer had dismissed Major O'Brien's papers as an obvious plant? The exploration of these what-ifs helped solidify the significance of Rupert's success. Had the deception failed silently, that is, if the documents were simply lost or ignored, the direct military consequence at Anzio would likely have been minimal in the short term. The stalemate would have continued unchanged. The more dangerous scenario would have been if the Germans had detected the ruse, if they had become aware that the Allies were attempting such a sophisticated forgery operation. It could have had wide-ranging negative effects. First, it would have hardened German skepticism of any captured documents, potentially causing them to disregard *real intelligence finds in the future. Second, it might have revealed to the Germans the Allies' specific interest in deceiving them about the eastern sector, potentially leading them to correctly deduce that the real threat lay elsewhere, in the center, thereby strengthening their defenses in exactly the wrong place for the eventual Operation Buffalo breakout. A failed deception can be worse than no deception at all, as it can illuminate the deceiver's true intentions. The success of Rupert, therefore, prevented these negative outcomes and created positive, tangible effects. By causing the precautionary shift of Panzer units, it created a slight but real degradation in German flexibility during the critical weeks of planning for the May offensive. When the real breakout came, those Panzers were not in the optimal central reserve location to counter the initial blows. In the brutal margin of error fighting of the Italian campaign, where small advantages were paid for in rivers of blood, this subtle misplacement of enemy resources could have saved hundreds, perhaps thousands, of Allied lives during the breakout battles. The broader legacy of Operation Rupert lies in its demonstration of principles that remain relevant in military and intelligence operations to this day. It is a textbook case in the mosaic theory of intelligence deception *. Instead of presenting one blatant lie, the deceiver provides many small, interconnected pieces of evidence, the personal letter, the orders, the training memo, that allow the target to assemble the false picture themselves. The target's own mind completes the puzzle, making the conclusion far more deeply believed. This technique is fundamental to modern counterintelligence and influence operations. Furthermore, Rupert highlights the critical importance of understanding the enemy's decision-making process ***. The PWB didn't just create a fake document, they modeled how that document would travel through the German intelligence bureaucracy, what questions each level would ask, and what they needed to see to be convinced. This customer-focused approach to deception is a hallmark of advanced psychological operations. Finally, the story endures as a powerful narrative of asymmetric ingenuity ***. In the colossal material conflict of WW2, dominated by tanks, bombers, and battleships, here was a victory achieved with paper, ink, and cleverness. It serves as an enduring reminder that conflict is, at its heart, a human endeavor, and that human psychology is a battlefield as consequential as any piece of terrain. The Ghost of Major O'Brien, a fiction that altered the disposition of real steel and fire, stands as a timeless testament to the idea that in war, What the enemy believes is often as important as what is true. With the successful breakout from Anzio in late May 1944 and the Allied capture of Rome on June 4th, the specific crisis that gave birth to Major William P. O'Brien passed. The ghost soldier, having served his purpose, faded back into the nothingness from which he was conjured. There were no citations for him, no memorials. His serial number was retired into the void. Captain Harris and the PWB moved on to other challenges in the long march north through Italy. The ultimate fate of the German intelligence file on the American mountain warfare training officer is unknown, likely consumed in the flames of retreat or buried in an archive. But for a few critical weeks in the spring of 1944, he was as real as any officer in the U.S. Fifth Army to the German High Command. He lived in their situation maps, their threat assessments, and their deployment orders. He shaped reality by the sheer force of a well-told lie. The time is again 06:00 hours, but now on Wednesday, May 24, 1944. The great breakout from Anzio is in its second day. Real American tanks of the 1st Armored Division, not phantom Panzers, are grinding forward. The decisive battle for which the beachhead was created is finally underway. And as those real soldiers fought and died, the subtle, invisible advantage created by their invisible comrade, the ghost who fooled the Panzers, was woven into the fabric of their struggle. It is a hidden thread in the tapestry of victory, a silent footnote to the thunder of history, proving that in the vast, brutal drama of WW2, even a shadow could cast a very long and very consequential darkness. Thank you for watching.